would really love to especially talk about is what's going on right now in relation
Yeah.
to religion and the attack on spirituality.
Yeah, what's happening right now, it's really hard to grasp what's happening right now, I think. You can look at it from a lot of different perspectives. You could look at it from a historical, um, you could look at it from a biblical perspective, um, and civilizational perspective too. They're all kind of connected. Like if you read the Bible, uh, it, there's a long stretch of time that goes in cycles where humans, well, in this case, the Jewish people, would would really be connected with God, and they would be following all the rules, and everything would be going really well, like amazingly well. And then they would veer away from that. They would get away from that, and they would kind of go in the opposite direction for a while, and then things would get really, really bad. And then they would wake up. Usually there would be a prophet, or in the older book there would be what's called a judge, and the word judge in the book, in the Bible, the book of Judges, the word judge actually means leader. So a leader would step up and then lead the people back to God, basically. And I'm talking about it from, there's different ways of interpreting it, but I'm looking at it more from a spiritual perspective. So so there's spiritual ups and downs to civilizations, and we may be going through like a spiritual down, and it may be temporary. It may just be growing pains to get to something better, or it may be the beginning of a long downward kind of trajectory. It's hard to know. But in the past, if we look at the Bible, and the thing is, you can't even really look at the Bible totally like historically, but we can sort of look at it metaphorically and say that there are these cycles that humans go through, and we can look at history in other ways too, where humans go through these ups and downs, these dark periods. An interesting book that I read part of, but I didn't really get too far into it because it's really hard to read, is by Winston Churchill, and the book is called A History of the English-Speaking Peoples, and he goes through the entire history of Britain. And there was about 1,000 years or something of what we know as the Dark Ages, and I never really understood this before, but the Romans invaded England back around about 2,000 years ago, and they brought with them civilization. Before that, England was pretty barbaric, and Rome brought civilization with all the good things that come with civilization: technology, um, language, writing, school, like just all these different things that we take for granted. And so, for example, just one little thing. Uh, Britons, during that period after the Romans left for a little while, they had heated homes. Okay, when Rome left, Rome basically left England because they started to collapse. So they just left all these places that they had conquered and left people to their own devices. And people went back to uh, the the way that they lived before. They slowly declined back into this pre-civilizational. Well, they were still civilized, but all that good stuff, like heated homes, for example, was gone for 1,000 years. After that, there was nobody had a heated home, including the richest people. And so we can very easily take for granted, like, that we've been in a golden age in many ways for a while now. We can take for granted and just assume that it's going to keep going that way, but it tends to kind of go up and down, and sometimes it can go really far down.
I am with Dan Vanderwolf, who is an author. I have his first book, and his second book was recently published, which is called Was Jesus a Liberal or Conservative? Correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
And what did you come to the conclusion of, Dan?
Well, you got to read the book to find out the answer. um, Actually, it's sort of those terms, liberal and conservative, are useful terms, but they're just words, and the meaning of words change, and especially those two words. So what is liberal 50 years ago, it doesn't mean the same thing anymore. And was Jesus a liberal? Well, in his day and age, he was liberal in certain ways, and he was also extremely conservative in other ways, from the religious perspective of his time. But what people like to do is people like to get him on their side. So liberals, modern liberals, will try to make a case for Jesus being like a socialist, or Jesus being a liberal, and modern conservatives will try to make a case that no, we're on the side of Jesus because we're religious and we're all about Jesus. The truth is that Jesus basically said, and in certain ways he said, stay out of politics. He said, focus on what's important, which is God, which is spirituality. Politics and political issues. And basically the premise of the book is that the example that I use is that Jesus was asked, is it right to pay taxes to Caesar or not? And he said, well, let me see a penny or whatever, denarius, I think it's called. And he said, whose inscription is on that? And they said, it's Caesar's. So he said, render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God's. And what I take to that he meant by that, or what I take that to mean for me, is that we need to focus primarily on the spiritual, and that means actually primarily on ourselves individually, because you can't really focus on the spiritual in others. You can't change others. You can't. So there's a lot of things that we can probably do in the world, but still the most important thing, the number one thing, first thing, is to focus on spirituality within ourselves.
So how do you do that? And if you could speak into your history as well, as to how you have the credibility to be able to write books about Jesus the way that you have.
Well, I was a spiritual seeker at a young age, and I was always interested in the truth, and that kind of starts you off on a path that can go in a lot of different directions. Initially, I was really interested in New Age. I was interested in religion, and I was into like anything. I was just looking for answers, and I ended up in a spiritual group that honored Jesus, but in a kind of a Hindu context. And the group was kind of more cultish in many ways. Although I don't say that in a negative sense. I say that in a sense that cult-like groups have positives and negatives. They have, there's a upside. There can be an upside to it. Some cult groups are totally negative, 100% negative, and others are some negative, some positive. And this one was a mix. It was a mixed bag, and I learned a lot. And through this group, I was in the group for 10 years, and I learned a lot about going within, meditating, taking responsibility, being humble, because in a group like that, typically you have a teacher, a leader who you surrender to. So it teaches you how to surrender, and also how to be humble and be teachable. A lot of us aren't very teachable. Like a lot of spiritual people, the way that they approach it is not, and nowadays they approach it behind a computer screen. Their whole spiritual path is behind it, because that's how a lot of us live, right? And so they can pick and choose whatever they feel like doing, or whether they feel like going with, or whether they feel like doing with their time. Whereas in a group like the one I was involved in, you had to surrender a lot to what the teacher felt was best for you. So you kind of did have to give up some of your agency. And of course, there's a downside to that, right? You become less mature, and you can be, you're being controlled in many ways. But at the same time, it helps you, because the teacher could just say, hey, you have a hang up about this certain issue. I want you to go and get over it. And you do. You don't hold on to it. So anyway, that was one of the upsides to belonging in that group. But the other was that I learned about a lot of other teachers and teachings, Hinduism, the value of Hinduism, and then also was introduced to the teachings of David Hawkins. And through this long process, eventually I left the group, and eventually I first of all, let me explain. The reason why I eventually left the group is because I reached a plateau. I reached a point where I felt like I wasn't growing anymore spiritually. And I was stuck, and I needed to, and I also felt like I was kind of trapped. And so I needed to be totally honest with myself, and I was surrendering everything. So one of the things that group taught us was surrender everything to God. Every thought, every feeling, every emotion, just keep surrendering it to God. That's a very powerful practice. And I was doing that, and then something came up in my mind. Would you be willing to surrender your relationship with your teacher? And at that time, my relationship with my spiritual teacher was basically the most important thing in my life. And it was like, if you needed to surrender that to get closer to the truth or closer to God, would you do it? And I said yes. And then the next question was, would you be willing to surrender your marriage to God if that was required? And that took me a little longer to say yes to, but I did. Said, yeah, if that was required. And because what it turned out that leaving the teacher and leaving that group resulted in my marriage falling apart. So that was the cost. I had to pay a very big cost there.
You were married to someone that was in the group as well.
She was in the group as well, and so it indirectly resulted in her leaving me. And all these things happened, but they were all really good for me spiritually. It's funny because before we went live, I was thinking about, like, you and I can talk about what's going on in the world right now, and we can look at it and say it's bad, or there's a lot of negative stuff happening, and it could get a lot worse. But from another perspective, maybe sometimes what looks like worse is actually good, from a spiritual perspective, because it helps us grow. When everything's going really great in our lives, sometimes we can get kind of stuck, and it's not until we face a real challenge, or we're kind of brought to our knees, that sometimes we're able to surrender at a greater depth, or we're able to let go of the things that are holding us back. And so the marriage actually was holding me back. And when it left me, I was able to, like, pursue something I always wanted to do, was go see David Hawkins. He was still alive at the time. He's the author of Power versus Force and many other books. Amazing teacher. And I went and I saw him in Sedona, Arizona, speak. And something about that experience, and then I went there 2 more times, and I just had these really profound spiritual experiences where I felt like I was experiencing something that I was searching for I think it was 15 years at that time. And finally I kind of found some of what I was looking for, and it was such a breakthrough that I was just inspired to write that first book. You just want to share it with the world, right? Yeah, that book, Willingness to Love. Sort of like certain secrets come to you that you've been searching for years and years, and then you're like, I got to share that, because if I can give any of that to anybody, I mean, that's just what you naturally want to do.
So before we got together today, I actually flipped open your book and I landed on the money chapter. And
I just did too.
well, I think that collectively there's a lot of changing around monetary value and self-esteem and the interconnection around making money a god even. But what I loved in terms of what you were just saying and what I had read were just the quotes. And it's the fact that Jesus was saying, I was ready for a new choice. This is actually a quote you have at the top of that chapter with Brittany Shawley that says, I was ready for a new choice, and I declared to live my life in service to love. This calm, loving voice replied, thank you, and it is done. Now give everything you learn freely away.
Yeah.
So in the same way, the coins being Caesar's versus everything else belonging to God, and all of how that ties into the spiritual path and our relationship, and how everything leads us to the present moment more equipped to move forward. How have you been able to develop the resilience to actually leave a cult, which is the cult you are, that you chose to be in for a while, and now you're part of the culture that no one
The
sees as a
culture.
cult, but that still is
Yeah.
the cult we are? So how did you
Yeah.
gain strength to separate yourself from what previously you gave your autonomy and sovereignty to?
Yeah. Yeah. You have to want the truth more than you want whatever the benefits are to being involved in that. So that's what's happening right now. People are in the cult of our culture, and it has become increasingly like a cult. Um, much more so than when we were younger, like where you had much more freedom of mind going on. Um, so now, like, students are being brainwashed. I would say they're being brainwashed because I work in schools right now. Students are being brainwashed more than they're being taught, I believe. Um, Whereas when I was a student, there was probably some brainwashing going on, but there was a lot more teaching and learning and thinking and freedom. So in a cult, you don't have freedom to think on your own. And like I said, there can be a benefit to that. There can, there, because sometimes you're thinking on your own gets you into trouble, and having somebody else tell you what to think at a time in your life for some people can be helpful. The problem with that is that then there's a point when that's no longer helpful. The problem with a cult is that when it's no longer helpful, the cult doesn't tell you, the cult doesn't say, okay, it's time to leave the cult now. The cult just tells you, you better stay here for the rest of your life because you're not going to make it out there. If you leave, you're going to lose everything. And that's exactly what people are being taught. See, the thing is a lot of the things that you're being taught in a cult are subtle. They're not necessarily said openly. Like, my ex-wife left me not because her teacher said, you better leave your husband now, he's an outcast. She left because that was the subtle energy of the cult saying, he's gone off, he's an outsider now. And so it wasn't like overtly stated, you better leave him now. So there's a lot of things going on right now where people deep down know that if they go against the grain, they go against what they're being taught and programmed, and the status quo, the consensus view on things. If they go against that, they're going to lose everything. They'll lose their job, they'll lose their friends, they'll lose their status, they'll lose their online presence, they'll be depersoned. Maybe they won't be able to fly anymore. It's getting to that point where some of these things are on the horizon, it seems. Could be. So the strength, you get the strength from being more interested in the truth than whatever the perks are,
So
but
right now,
right now though, where the cult is at, the societal cult, where it's at right now, is that you can still live in the world and not be brainwashed. You can still exist here. It may come to the point where we got to get it. We can't even live here anymore. But right now we can still live our lives, fortunately, right? And the cults can't necessarily affect us.
because
But we might have to change. Sorry, we might have to change jobs in some cases.
well, I lost mine last month because
Yeah.
of not wearing a mask. And
Right.
what's going on is absolutely criminal because the
Yep.
corporations are forcing people into action when they're scared and unsure, and they're separating them from the culture of their workplace they previously found their identity in, most oftentimes, to then become segregated and then be thrown into the mystery of where their only input from the outside are friends or the small bubble that is ever being made smaller, or
Yeah.
the online propaganda.
Yep.
So
You
how
can't find the truth.
mm-mm.
You can't find the truth about anything online anymore. You can't find you can't find diversity of ideas online anymore. You get, if you type something into Google, you will find something that's been tailored for your eyes so that you'll get the message they want you to receive. You know, you'll get the narrative version. You won't get a diversity of ideas, even if you're looking for it. Even if you're looking for alternative viewpoints on a subject, you won't get those anymore. They're actually being totally like blocked, shadow banned or whatever it's called. But the Google will just direct you to where they want you to look now. Yeah.
So, how does somebody develop the resilience that you had to develop, that I've had to develop, that the ones who have different eyes to see the lies happening right now? How do people that haven't been forced to make the choice to leave something that they were part of, that we're all part of, how do people develop that kind of strength? What words of encouragement, of hope, of inspiration, motivation could you impart from your experience of having done what many people are being called to do now?
I'd say seek and you shall find. So Jesus said, seek and you shall find. So seek the truth. Okay. And that's the thing is, you don't even have to be religious. So if you don't like the word God, then just seek truth with a capital T, because God and truth are the same thing. And seek love, seek love and truth, because that will, I believe that will lead you step by step out of your prisons and out of your illusions. But it's a process, and that's okay. Like I said, the spiritual journey can twist and turn, but the key is to seek truth, because if you go down a wrong path, and this happens to a lot of us, we go down a wrong path for a while, thinking we're going in the direction of truth, but we're not. If you're kind of seeking the truth and you think you're getting somewhere, okay, and then suddenly you realize you're not where you thought you were. In fact, in some cases, you're going in the wrong direction. Or we got to be honest enough with ourselves to actually recognize that, admit to it within ourselves. So that takes humility, and it just takes this tremendous dedication to the truth. One of the things I like about the Christian saints is that they tend to be extremely humble, almost too much. Saint Francis, but they're extremely humble and hesitant to put themselves on any sort of pedestal ever. That's something that that's a lesson all spiritual people should learn. Be humble about your fragility as a human being. We are or vulnerability rather. We're vulnerable to deception. Every single one of us at all times are vulnerable to deception. That's the first lesson in the Bible, really, is that humans were vulnerable to deception, and they got tricked, and we fell for an illusion, and we've been trying to get out of it ever since. And everybody's in the same boat. So know that you're vulnerable, and just keep seeking truth, and just keep being humble, and you'll slowly move in that direction, and ask for help.
Speak into the best ways that you've found people, information leaders, that you could trust the information they shared.
I would say David Hawkins. As far as modern teachers goes, I like David Hawkins. He wrote a ton of books. And then I would also go with the New Testament of the Bible. The whole Bible is valuable, but I think the New Testament is the most valuable, and the Gospels are the most valuable within the New Testament. So if you don't want to read the whole Bible, you could just read Matthew. You just read the first book of the New Testament, and there's so much power in Jesus' words and life that any spiritual person could just take the book of Matthew, and that would be enough for their whole life to just apply those principles. And so, like, you don't have to take it as a religious thing either. You don't have to like become a church-going Christian and believe in a certain form of Christianity as a religion. You can just take those words and try to live them, and try to experience the deeper meaning of those and realize the deeper truths within there. The other thing I would recommend is if you are open to other religions, I really like some of the Hindu scriptures, such as the Bhagavad Gita or the Srimad Bhagavatam, and they're not as it sounds that they when I say it, like if you never heard those words, it sounds complicated and sounds very exotic, but they're very, very accessible. The Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam, they're extremely accessible, and they really cut to the heart of, I think, what is empowering, and what it is devotion to God. So they're books that are really about devoting yourself to God, and you could say truth as well, just devoting yourself on a heart level.
How do you devote yourself on a heart level, and how do you get into your heart?
Well, that's why I wrote the book Willingness to Love, is because to suddenly experience that I suddenly had the experience where I felt love in my heart. And if you feel love in your heart, you're already close. If you can just stay in that feeling of love, right? If you can just, and then come from that feeling. So just stay in that feeling of love and let it fill your heart. And anything that helps you experience that feeling, like, when I say love, it's not like love for another person, not like romantic love. Like, that's a different experience. It's a wonderful experience too. But I mean, it's a spiritual kind of feeling. And I get it. I get it when I go to church. I get it when I go to sacred sites. So when I was seeing David Hawkins the third time, we would go around Sedona, and there's different there's almost like pilgrimage places you can go. They're just really high energy places, and you go there and you just feel you just have these higher spiritual experiences. And I started to have this feeling of love in the heart. And then I realized you kind of tune into that feeling to stay there. And then when I came back after that trip, I just started to go to places wherever I could feel more of that. And in my case, I would just go to church even when there was nobody there. Like, some churches still had their doors open at the time. So you could walk in and there'd be nobody, because nobody goes to church when you don't have to. And so you could go there and you have the entire church to yourself. And you just feel this unexplainable, really. It's a mystery. It transcends religion. You just feel this inexplicable connection to divinity. And then you're there again. So I kept doing that. It's like every time, it's like I'd go and I'd recharge to that energy. It's an energy. It's not an emotion. It's beyond emotion.
What is the difference between an energy and an emotion from your perspective? Because I've always said E-motion for energy in motion. So I'm curious what your perception of the difference would be.
They're connected for sure. But maybe it's semantics a little bit, but I started to become more aware of energy fields. So David Hawkins talks about energy fields. So there's higher and lower energy fields, and wherever we kind of resonate at, or whether it's almost like whatever we align with, that's where we tend to be spiritually. That's how people evolve spiritually. So you align with a higher field, and then you actually move up to that field. And some of the higher states are beyond, they're beyond like emotions that are typical. So for example, we know the feeling of love, but there are states of love that are just beyond that are hard to describe. They're like heavenly. So it's sort of, I guess you could still call it an emotion, but it's sort of beyond ordinary, earthly, beyond the ordinary for this realm.
So more states of being rather than emotional states.
Yeah, kind of. And you are stepping into other realms in a sense. You're stepping into possibly heavenly realms for a moment.
which start at the level of contentment by Esther Abraham Hicks's emotional guidance system that has 22 different levels of emotion, with boredom at the top of the downward spiral that takes you to depression, and contentment takes you up to peace and possibility, and everything in between on that level. Being familiar with the emotional guidance system and David Hawkins' scale of consciousness, how would you connect those?
I'm not aware of the Abraham Hicks teachings as much, but the Hawkins talks about basically surrendering the lower emotions. Instead of we do many things with the lower emotions. We repress them, we project them onto others, we try to escape them, and he suggests to be with the feelings and then let them go, the lower energies, let them go, and then also connect, kind of what I was talking about, where you connect with the higher energies. So it's kind of a two-pronged process where you're letting go of the negative and you're aligning with the positive. And that's the thing too with like Christianity as it's actually written in Scripture is not about pretending that negativity doesn't exist, but you're facing it completely. Jesus was totally facing the devil, right? He wasn't afraid of the devil. He wasn't gonna, the devil was afraid of him, but he was facing all that negativity that was coming at him, and totally aligning with God, good, and love. Yeah.
What is the devil?
That's a very interesting question. I don't know for sure. I don't know for sure, but I know that there's something to see. Part of it is the usefulness of a teaching is, does it help you grow spiritually? If the purpose of life, the purpose of the human experience is actually to transcend, it's actually to transcend where we are right now, and go higher. That's the only reason why we're here. Then an understanding of the devil could be helpful, or it might not be helpful. It depends on how we understand it. But is it real? Yeah, it's real, because if is suffering real? Is hell real? Well, we've all experienced hell. We're here, right? I mean, I look around. I even just like visually now, I look around and I'm living in a nightmare. When I go to work, and then there's kids coming off a bus. They're all wearing masks, and I'm living in a nightmare right now. But the real hell is not the visual. The real hell is inside. The real hell is the suffering we experience. Who caused the suffering? Well, if we go back in the Bible, and we can even look at the devil as a metaphor. We don't need to think of the devil as a real entity or not. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But metaphorically and spiritually, it's for real. Because it's that illusion or that trickery that happens, that deception. Because when we're totally in the truth, when we're totally in heaven, we're not in suffering at all. No matter what, we can't be in suffering. But as soon as we step out of that, then it's as if this trickery happens, and the devil is the deceiver. It's the part of our mind that deceives us into falling for something that causes us unnecessary suffering.
Unnecessary suffering.
Yeah.
And are you familiar with C.S. Lewis's work? And he talks about how the greatest gift that the devil ever gave himself was to make people think that he wore red tights and had horns and a tail. So they didn't know to perceive the devil when it drew near to deceive.
Yeah, the devil's subtle. See, that's the thing with temptation. I talk about temptation a little bit in my book, and both of my books, really. And the thing with spiritual temptation is, by its nature, it's subtle. So you can read books and books about spiritual temptation in the hopes that you will not fall for one. But when it comes to you, it's going to be in a different, it's going to be cloaked differently than all the things you read about. It's going to be subtler to you because otherwise it's not a temptation, right? If you see it coming, it's not a temptation.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's what it is. The tempter or the devil, it's like comes with something that seems good, but it's not good. And it is important to, I think it is important to discuss this, or um to consider this if you're a spiritual person, because your goal is to go further and higher, closer to the truth, right? So anything, you got to be aware that people on that path that you're on have been deceived and have tragically ended up, not even anywhere close to their goal, or even worse, going in the opposite direction. I like to use Hitler as an example because it's such an extreme and obvious, like everybody gets Hitler. Hitler's bad, but how it all started, do people really think that Hitler thought he was the evil, you know, horrible person when he was doing everything he was doing in the beginning? He thought, and everybody else thought he was a great hero. And everybody that went along with Hitler in the beginning thought that they were on a righteous path, like everybody. And midway through, probably 50% of them still felt that they were on a righteous path. And the rest of them were just like, well, if we speak up, we're dead. So we better, But you see, you can be going down a path and think that it's right and be totally wrong. So this kind of comes back to our other point about just the willingness to just want to know the truth, no matter what it is, even if it's not comfortable.
And for people that feel like we need to do more, because we live in that culture of the need to be busy and to achieve and produce, a spiritual path may seem a very passive, inactive way to invest our energetic resources, of which we are limited to 24 hours in a day, and we all get the same, and we invest that as we see fit. So how do you balance the spiritual path with the need to actually call people to account for their participation in a treasonous scheme?
Yeah, that is a question I've been wrestling with myself. So like right now, I'm focusing a lot on writing. I'm going to go back to a verse from Jesus. He talks about the talents. So basically, we're all given, and actually, the word that's used, the translation is the word talent, but it actually means like coins, I think. So the master gives his servants coins. He gives one person one coin, one person two coins, and one person five coins, and then leaves for a journey, and then comes back and sees what did they do with the coins, how did they invest their money. And the person with five coins invested it and ended up with 10 coins. And so he was praised, like you did well. The guy that had the person that had two coins ended up with four coins. So he did well also. The person that was only given one coin, he hid it under a napkin because he was afraid of losing it or something. He was afraid of getting in trouble. That he was afraid that the master would be upset with him. Anyway, I don't know what his reasoning was, but he did not do so well. The master was not pleased with him because he didn't multiply his talents. He didn't, in other words, he didn't expand his gifts. He didn't make use of his gifts and produce something more. So I think that's what we all have to do, is we all have to take whatever our gifts, our talents, whatever we've been given, and multiply it for good. Okay. So that's an individual thing. So some people are going to do more of an inner journey, and some people are going to be more activist and more warriors, and fight back in a more outward way. And the thing with fighting back is we can we can easily get into negativity, right? Because we're in a war, and war is negative. So the people that are warriors have to really constantly come back and try to come from a place of love in whatever they're doing, because it's easy to hate what's like the stuff you mentioned treason. Whenever I have a thought of there's these people that I think should be in jail, and they're running the country, or they're running, the United States, or they're running the world essentially. And a lot of them, in my opinion, or from what I can see from my perspective, they should probably be in jail. Like they really are literally traitors to democracy. And so it's hard to not feel a little bit of anger or even hatred towards those people, or not necessarily those people, but that energy that's doing that. And especially when you think of all the suffering that it seems to be causing or will cause in the future, it's hard not to be upset about that. But when we're upset about it, then we can easily just kind of fall down into that. It's almost like a trap in a way, right? Hawkins talked about this. This is an interesting analogy. He talked about, I think he was talking about the Middle East and the conflict in the Middle East that's been going on for like thousands of years. And how it happens is like, so people on one side start throwing rocks at the other people. And just because they don't like them, so they start throwing rocks at them, and then they hurt somebody, or maybe they kill somebody. Now the other side has to do something about it. They have to retaliate, right? Because you can't just let the other people like kill one of your people. They have to do something. So they're angry now too. So they've fallen into the trap of hatred. Now both sides are going to hate each other forever, and they're never going to get out. So again, Jesus gave the answer to that. He said, forgive, even if they do horrible things, whatever, we have to forgive them, because that's the only way out of the trap.
How do you
But
practice forgiveness? that's that's a big one.
and I think if you can start to see, try to see how people are innocent in a way, and like they're deceived. So if everybody's in a cult, right, and the cult's doing bad things, well, they're all brainwashed. So are you going to fault them for being brainwashed? Yeah, you gotta, and to know that you're capable of the same thing, to know that you could easily have gone down that same path, but we were blessed with whatever we were blessed with in this life, so that we wanted to know the truth, and so we can see some things maybe that other people can't see, but we can't fault them for that. We need to be, if we want to be kind of like the leaders, or we want to be like, if we really want to be on the high ground, then we have to do the high ground things, like forgive, right? It's hard to do sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just quote in my head when I'm facing particular individuals in my life that are not kind towards me because of what I represent in terms of change, and not standing for what's going on, nor willing to comply with it or conform. And those people who judge me so harsh and treat me very disrespectfully, it's like Jesus said, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And it's
Yeah.
just like, that's all I can say to myself, because it's like, I get it, but I don't get how people have become so desensitized to their own nature and so separated from their own nature that they can't find compassion for me. And yet I then say, hey, they can't do it for me. It's because they don't have it for themselves. So I send you love, and I just don't like you.
Yeah. Well, it's not knowing, not realizing that negativity, and we all do this, right? We don't realize that negativity is not the answer ever. Like, so whenever we have a negative thought, or when we go on a gripe, or we go on a where we focus too long on negativity, we're we're being deceived in a way, right? Because we think that somehow that negativity is gonna lead us, I don't know, it's gonna lead us to something better, or maybe we enjoy it. There's a payoff. That's actually one of the most valuable things I got from Hawkins' teachings. He talks about that there's a payoff to negative feelings, that we actually get something out of it. And I never realized that before I heard that. It's like, oh, like we actually, and he's like, the way he puts it is, we actually juice it, we enjoy it. and when I'm at work, and I try to avoid I try to avoid staff rooms. I work at schools. I try to avoid staff rooms because they're just just pure negativity plus food. But they don't, because of COVID, you're not allowed to bring food. But um, so you walk by and there's like gossip going on all the time. There's always some drama, and there's a part of the ego or whatever that's like drawn to that. It's like, oh, what's this? Some negative drama sounds interesting. I want to hear. Eavesdrop. And you're like, this is, and it's literally like juicy. You're like, I wonder what's next in this. But is it healthy? Is it good? Is it true? Is it constructive? No, no, no. It's just, it's kind of addictive. It's kind of, it's kind of juicy. So it's actually Lent. I'm on Lent right now. I'm not Catholic, but I'm practicing Lent at the moment. And so Lent is like giving up those things, giving up those little indulgences that are not healthy. And people like to think of it as like food indulgence, but that kind of indulgence is much more important even than food, right?
How you feed your mind is ultimately what your real estate gets full of.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
So from the second book, I want to, we're going to wrap up because we've got an hour, and we'll keep the podcast to around an hour. But would definitely love to have you on again, because who you are, Dan, I've always respected, because you embody what you've went through. You embody the piece you write about. You are living what you preach. And
Thanks.
You don't preach it from a preachy place of I'm better than. You very much do it from that humble place of saying, this is the best that I've found so far. Take what truth resonates for you.
Mm-hmm.
So for
Thanks.
someone, absolutely. And so for someone that is not familiar with you, and also doesn't necessarily have a good relationship with religion, and then hears that you've written a book called Was Jesus Liberal or Conservative? How would you frame that book for people who are curious and unsure?
Unsure about religion?
About mixing religion, politics,
Oh yeah.
about stepping into taboo areas like those?
Yeah. Well, the purpose of the book really is for people who are going to be influenced by politics, and that's almost everybody in today's age. So, in many ways, politics has become the new religion, because religion, traditional religion, has less and less of an influence on society because of politics. And politics, or I should say ideologies, political ideologies, have taken the place of religion in many instances, and have gained more and more of an influence on society, but more importantly on people's minds. Because like I said, like in schools, it's like, I don't know how much, like 50%, maybe 80%, maybe 90%, just indoctrination of political ideologies. So the problem, there's a social problem to that, which I'm not really going to get into, but more importantly, there's a spiritual aspect to it that can be very detrimental. So the book is about helping people see through that, because you don't want to be affected by it, because all these political ideologies I'm talking about, they all resonate very low. They seem like they're good, but they're not good. They're not positive. They're not. We didn't talk about the scale of consciousness. Hawkins developed this scale of consciousness that goes from 1 to 1,000, and so there's the level 200, and anything above 200 is good, positive, and anything below 200 is negative. So sometimes something can sound really positive and good, but then when it's calibrated, you realize it's actually below 200. And if it's below 200, then its effects, its fruits, will be negative. And for society to adopt that, that's problematic, right? But for an individual to just allow themselves to be indoctrinated, and children really don't really have a say. But you want to be aware of that's happening, and to not allow it to happen to you. I would recommend, if you want, I would recommend real religion. Traditional religion is limited, very limited, has a lot of downsides to it, can have a lot of downsides to it, but it's 10 times better than politics posing as religion. And even higher than religion is spirituality. But the spirituality can be a little bit tricky. Sometimes you need a little bit of religion because we're not advanced enough to have pure spirituality sometimes. So we may need a little bit of religion, and to not, you can go to church and you don't have to convert to that religion. You can just pop into church and see if you get anything. If you don't, fine. You can read scripture, see if you get anything. Just read it with an open mind. Find whatever helps you, feeds you spiritually, because I can guarantee that the doctrine, the ideological doctrine that's being kind of pumped into our brains through the media, through the education systems, it's not going to give you what you really want. It's not going to get you any higher, that's for sure.
Nor will it give peace.
Nor will it give peace. No.
Because
No.
the soul senses truth. The soul,
What's that? Yeah.
soul senses truth. The soul is our truth detector.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. So you can fall for a lie. Yeah. You can fall for a lie. And then you have to pay the consequences spiritually, and that's the problem, is that people can fall, like some people, for example, I talk about in the book, you can be really kind of doing well spiritually, but then you start getting more and more into politics. It's really a distraction more than anything. I've done it myself. There's certain kinds of spirituality and certain kinds of politics that kind of creep in, and they're really a distraction more than anything. Some of the new age ideas and stuff can be like that too, where they're more of a distraction than anything. They're not really going to lead you anywhere positive. Some of the conspiracy theory stuff is like that as well, where it's actually very entertaining and it's very juicy. It's something that the mind likes to grab onto and likes to play with and think about and talk about and watch YouTube videos about. But it ultimately is not an overall positive energy. So that's another reason why reading scripture is helpful, because if you read scripture, and I mean not just the Bible, but also say the Bhagavad Gita, and then you come from that place, and then whatever else you entertain, if something is totally foreign, has nothing to do with any of the scripture you've read, it's like something outside of all that, it might be questionable. That makes sense. So to have like a real truth detector, we need, because like I said, we're easily deceived, all of us. So to have a good truth detector, that's where I think scripture is very handy. It's very more than handy. It's maybe something indispensable, really, because then you can see, you're like, oh, this doesn't, Jesus never said anything about this, or Krishna never said anything about this, or Buddha never said anything about this. So maybe I shouldn't buy into it. Right? But a lot of people are just buying into it because they never actually looked at what these great teachers said. We got to trust somebody. Ultimately, we got to trust somebody, right?
Yes. We've been trained not to trust. So thank you for being a truth teller, a whistleblower, someone who knows what you stand for, a warrior. And so for the Peaceful Inner Warriors United podcast today, I ask everyone as the final question, Dan, what is your definition of a warrior?
My definition of a warrior is, well, you're a warrior, aren't you?
I think so. Yeah.
It's one of the four energies in Hinduism. It's a spiritual energy that is required. It's necessary, and some people are warriors and some people aren't. And the warriors are very needed, and they need the other side is the priest class. There's the warrior class and the priest class, and they need each other, right? They're both all of us have a role to play. So the warrior has a role that is can be aggressive when needed, and so they have to make sure that they're coming from love and truth. Otherwise, they're a negative force. So yeah, the warrior can be a very positive force. They have to make sure they're grounded in something real.
I love you, Dan. You're amazing. Thank you
You
for
too, Laura.
thank you for this. And I look forward to, where can people find your book as well?
I'm on Amazon.com and Amazon, all Amazon. And so this is what the other one looks like.
Liberal or conservative? Was Jesus liberal or conservative? And other book is Willingness to Love. So definitely check those out. Dan Vanderwolf is who you've had the pleasure of getting to hear today, and very much look forward. If any questions come up from what was spoken of today, please do comment on the video. Let us know so that we can speak into those further, and certainly you'll be seeing Dan and I come together again soon. So thank you.
Thanks, Laura.
My pleasure.
God bless.
There we go. Yay, we're off streaming.
Awesome.
That was awesome. You have so much skill to offer. When you said about the warrior, it's just like it's like, yes, I think so, but like, I don't know. There's the part of me that like, I don't know. There's the part of me that's just like, well, do you say it, or do you just let other people make their own assumptions? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, are you? I mean, I think. See, I don't think I am really. Not naturally. It's almost like I can step into that sometimes when I have to, but it's not like my preference. It's not my go. So yeah, some people are more naturally warriors. I don't know. Like what's going on right now. So like, we need warriors. And when my friend sent me out some stuff, like she wants me to send an email to all the politicians about a certain bill that they're passing that has to do with people having sex changes at a young age. And so I'm gonna do that. But so that's sort of a warrior thing to do. Like let's do something to prevent this, or to facilitate this not happening or whatever. Activists are warriors.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess you're a warrior, right?